In the world of those who study trauma responses, I most often find uh, trauma responses reflected when people are adults. And this is understandable because when people are old enough to really figure out, what's going on, uh, usually it's a trauma response that has gotten them to that place. And I use as an example the world of recovery because those trying to recover are adults. And one of the things that I went through in my own personal case of trauma responses is that I was had the great fortune to be handed over to a psychiatrist, old school, an Indian guy. I've told you about him before, Dr. Dinshaw Gagrat. And he really, really helped me by forcing me to look back into my childhood. And unfortunately, as I tried to look back at that time, those memories were like gone. And it has taken 25 years of recovery for me to really begin to understand what happened to me as a child, as a 5-year-old boy in the bathtub with my mother. And, you know, uh, so I want to talk to you today about my childhood trauma responses. And I think this is important because people who have kids today are much more observant of their behaviors, and I think that's a good thing because many of those behaviors are, in fact, trauma responses. And the first thing that I would have to say in terms of early childhood trauma responses was that I felt something was wrong with me. And that's kind of the first indicator to me that helped me, get through all of this and come to a place where I am very comfortable in my own skin and happy to be Terry Heaton. Uh, but let's go to one that's more, it's actually kind of entertaining, but I want you to see the desperation with which this came. In the third grade, they told us one day that we were going to have an eye test the next day. Well, testing for me was a very dangerous area because if you failed a test, then people were likely to figure out that there was something wrong with you. And I couldn't allow that to happen. So you have to picture this with me, but we were led into a room where there was the testing taking place over here and a long hallway, not really a hallway, but a bench against the wall where we were led in, and then you processed along that wall until you got to the front place where you could have your eyes tested. And what I would do, I was so troubled by this test. I really had to pass the eye test. And that compulsion, that obsession is a trauma response. So what I did was I memorized the eye chart along that as I was sliding along that bench because the eye chart was visible to everybody in that room. Um, and it was easy. I was really good at memorization, and that got me out of a lot of potential scraps as a kid. But I memorized the eye chart, and so I got up there, and it was my turn to test, and I read every line on the eye test. Couldn't see the bottom, 3 or 4, but that didn't make any difference because I had already memorized them. And I have to say that the nurses administering the test knew that I had memorized it because apparently I wasn't the first. And so they played along with me for several years until the third year when I tried to do it. They put these Coke bottle lenses on me and asked me to see what I could see. And I read off the entire eye chart because I had memorized it. Well, they started calling me Old Eagle Eyes. And again, this is a memory that came back to me after recovery, and it was very much a trauma response. Then I got into, I don't know, it was a late elementary school. I got into gambling with fellow students in a game called Match Me. This is where you would take a coin. Two people would have the same denomination coin, and you'd flip it in the air and catch it and read what that was. Well, if your denomination was higher than the next guy's, you would win, or you'd say, heads or tails. And, the one who was right, took the money from the other guy. And it was really gambling. And I got so desperate to win at that game that I actually stole money from our offering to church. And to me, this was like no big deal, but it caught up with me when we had I grew up in the Christian Reformed faith, and every year, two elders from the church would come by the home to just, question the kids about their Bible knowledge and to talk to the parents about their giving. So this year, when I was stealing the collection money, the elders came and they talked to the kids, and we did our duties. And then they turned to my mother and father and said, "We noticed that your giving is down. Are you having, financial problems as a family that we could help with?" And I had probably 6 months earlier expressed to my parents that I wanted to be the one who put the collection envelope in the plate because, I was trying to impress them with my Christian values. And instead, I would open it up and take out a $5 bill or something and, close it back up. So naturally, our family's offering was reduced. So I'll never forget that day. The three of us boys were sitting on the couch, and my dad and mom were in separate chairs. And the moment that my dad realized that our offering was less than it should have been, he gave me a look that, signified I was in deep, deep trouble. And, I can laugh about it today, but, that was a pretty serious thing to be doing for a young boy. And yet I did it, and that is a trauma response. I got my first orgasm when I was climbing a rope in, probably about the 6th grade. And I don't remember much about it, but I do remember two things. One, I couldn't climb a fucking rope. I just couldn't. I didn't have the upper body strength or the technique that allowed me to do it. And let me tell you, I viewed that as a staggering failure. And that is a trauma response too. But while I was on the rope, the way it rubbed up against me caused me to ejaculate. And that embarrassment, oh man, that was huge to me. And that too was a trauma response and something I could never tell anybody about because they would figure out that something was wrong with me. But this forced me into isolation, and I just couldn't be like everybody else. I had to be alone. I felt safe alone. So, I collected butterflies, and I would start at like 6 o'clock in the morning, take my jar with carbon tetrachloride and my butterfly net and a lunch maybe, and I would be gone for the entire day. We had railroad tracks running behind our house, and it gave me a place to wander into, adjacent fields, and there was a swamp, and even had a little forest, so to say. It was while I was out chasing butterflies one day that I came across a little place within the trees that teenagers were gathering, to drink and carouse. And I found some men's magazines at that time. And let me tell you, back in those days, men's magazines basically showed you nothing. It was highly titillating to me, however, and so I began, collecting images and pictures that I found in those magazines in an attempt to understand sex. Well, I couldn't understand because I didn't know anatomy, and especially not a woman's anatomy. So this opened up a whole new chapter in my life because I was also very, very good at art. And I could draw basically anything. And so I started drawing my own version of nudes and nude women, especially in bondage. I got caught at age 10 with my collection of nude artwork and bondage artwork, and I got in a lot of trouble for that. But my parents had no idea what was driving me because I kept it a secret. It was also during this time that I would go on long walks throughout southeastern Grand Rapids as a kid. I would walk along the curbs and pick up cigar bands. Now, that's an interesting observation to me today because that meant that I was very comfortable walking with my head down. And that too is a trauma response. So I would be gone for hours collecting my cigar bands. And I tell you, I had a hell of a collection, and I wish I had it today because it would be worth, in fact, a lot of money. But one day, we did all of our grocery shopping at the A&P store. And one day, my parents went in to do their shopping and with my two brothers, and I said I wanted to stay in the car. But what I did was get out of the car and go looking for cigar bands. I lost track of time while I was doing this. And so imagine my parents' distress when they got back to the car and I wasn't there. Today we would think that I had been kidnapped, but actually I was just out being alone with my head down and, using that to find cigar bands. It's kind of why I, collect the coins that I find in parking lots today, because I walk with my head down, and that too is a trauma response. I was a huge fan of my grandmother. This would be my mother's mother. And like so many families did back then, we lived very close to my grandmother. Um, I'm sure my father bought that property because it was close to my mother's mother. And, but my mother had had her own issues growing up. And so the relationship between them was, she had been bullied. And the relationship between them was kind of strained. And that became apparent when I was a little boy. I used to spend hours upon hours at my grandmother's house. And the reason I did that was that she was a tremendous real life artist, a painter. And her paintings were just, even today, by even today's standards, they are just spectacular. I got one of them as an adult, and I treasure that particular painting. But she taught me and helped teach me art, and I was just enthralled by being with her and watching her paint. Her greatest artistic achievement, though, was drawing a picture of her son, my uncle Don. When he was in the military, she drew a portrait of him from memory. And let me tell you, if you think that's easy, try it sometime. That talent was unique, and I felt special being with her. And it was a great relief to my distress at the time. However, there became a great spat between my parents and my grandmother over something that she had said about when I come there, which was she always gave me money. And they didn't like that. They didn't, think that I should be going to my grandmother's house and asking for money, that they couldn't give me. So they broke off completely relations with my grandmother. And again, she lived 2 blocks away. And I can remember taking my bike and going to the intersection where I could look down at her house and just crying because that had been taken away from me. And I viewed that as a rejection, an abandonment, and that really drove me deeper and deeper into myself. And like I said, I used the skill that she helped give me to, draw pictures of nudes. And, that is a story unto itself. So these are some of the things that happened to me as a child that were clearly trauma responses. And I wish that we spent more time today studying trauma responses in children instead of adults, because I think it would produce great fruit for our culture and help a great many suffering people. And of course, I could be wrong because, after all, I'm just a commentary.